Hi, good afternoon. My name is Jay Rothman, and I am the host of Real People, Real Health. I am excited and honored to have in the studio with me today Martin Fretwell, joining me from the UK. Welcome to Real People, Real Health, Martin.
Thank you. Thank you, Jay. I really appreciate it. I am also excited, but like I said in my post, also nervous.
Well, I guess that's part of being human. If we weren't nervous, we want to question that as well. But today's topic is all about mental health. And I was introduced to you actually through a social media platform that both you and I are on. You had reached out to me a number of months ago and invited me to participate in an upcoming virtual summit on emotional freedom and mental health, and as a speaker. And so fast forward, I said yes. You interviewed me, and that summit is coming up, I believe next week from the 17th to the 20th. We'll get into talking about this summit a little bit later in our conversation here in the podcast. But what I'd like to do is to ask you and to share with myself and our viewers and community listeners, what is it that got you passionate about creating a mental health summit, virtual summit in 2020? What was it that was your why?
And it's funny, whenever we kind of explore these stories, we always try and find like that trigger moment that was like either a rock bottom or a transformative experience that meant, oh, this is what I need to do. The truth of the matter is it's a little bit more nuanced than that. But I've had plenty of experiences with depression. At the time, I didn't know that it was depression. It's only really kind of looking back on it now that I understand what I was experiencing. And it culminated to like a really pivotal moment in 2018 in a place called the Rock Bar in Bali. So I call it my rock bottom, just for like a bit of performance.
Okay.
Make it sound really good that way. But like it was quite a surreal moment, because I went to Bali to find myself, right? A very, very cliched moment. Try and eat, pray, love my way to happiness. All right. So I'd heard all about Bali. I'd heard all about the kind of spiritual experiences that you can have there. And I thought, I want to go there and explore and get curious of what happiness is. And little did I know that I was still trying to find happiness in external circumstances rather than from within. But Bali, as Bali does, it did give me the awakening that I needed, just not in the way that I needed it. And I remember I was at this bar, and it's this incredible bar carved into the rock face. And the idea is it's one of the top 10 locations in the world to watch a sunset. So there I was, watching this amazing sunset in this amazing country, utterly miserable and cripplingly lonely, like really, really lonely. So I would actually send I would take photos and post them on social media, desperately trying to get any kind of like reaction from anybody back home, just any kind of interaction to make me feel like I wasn't alone in that moment. And it got to a point whereby I was even asking questions in my mind of like, would anybody even care if I didn't come back from this bar? Does my life have any meaning? Does my life have any purpose? Really kind of aggressive questions like that in my mind. And weeks passed and a few weeks passed, and I eventually came home back to the UK, and I said to myself, and you and I have talked about this idea of surrender, I said to myself, I don't want to feel this way anymore. I will do anything to not feel this way anymore. And then from that moment on, I was kind of much more open to different experiences, different ideas, different concepts that could come into my life. And I started this journey of healing semi-accidentally, because I didn't pretend that I had all the answers. I didn't pretend that I know how to fix this. I can use my brain. I'm a smart person. I can read a few books and fix this problem. I actually just gave in to what would come my way. And I've built a number of pillars now, which kind of keep so much of that loneliness, the depression, those thoughts at bay. But not only have I created the pillars that keep them at bay, I've been able to pull out a lot of the weeds and the roots that I'd repressed for years that had led up to that moment in the first place. So the goal of the summit is effectively, I'm not a coach. I've never been a coach a day in my life, and I'm certainly not qualified to be a therapist or counselor. So the summit is my way of extending a hand out to any men that were where I was 2 years ago and beyond.
Wow. Beautiful. Now, the depression and everything that came with it didn't just show up in Bali. It was there, as you shared, for some time. The defining moment that changed everything, if I may paraphrase you, was when you realize you're in perhaps one of the most beautiful settings that the world has to offer. And in that moment, you had clarity that instead of feeling joy, happiness, bliss, gratitude, calm, you realized that something was wrong. Something within you wasn't right.
It was what's particularly kind of interesting as I look back on it now, because you tell the story in a certain way, because you leave out a few details when you tell the story. But I can look back now and say that was a very clarifying moment. But there was also like a 3-month window before I'd actually started the healing process, when I actually finally said, okay, I'll do anything now to feel better. Whereby, like, I was still in that same, I was still having those same feelings. I then went from Bali to Kuala Lumpur, then to Vietnam, and then to to Thailand, then Vietnam, and then the Philippines, finally. And that feeling followed me across all of these countries. And it was when I came back, I started to actually make the changes. So we like to think that it's this one defining moment that sets us on a path, because we love the idea of a hero arc or a hero's journey. But I can look back now and say that was a key moment, but it did extend beyond that and lasted 3 months.
How did your challenge with depression, which I believe is really what came to the forefront on this 3-month trip, impact the quality of your life at, let's say, at home, but also in the workplace? Were you a highly functioning depressed man, or not so?
It depended on the environment. It definitely depended on the environment. My first kind of experience of depression was for about, I don't know how long, but it felt like a year after a rough breakup, where my confidence and self-esteem was just absolutely obliterated. And but I've always been into kind of personal development. So nurturing my mind, I've always kind of believed and pushed my intellect and my knowledge and my personal growth, which meant in certain avenues, I was doing really, really well. I was a sales director and moved to Los Angeles for an events company and things like that. And I was doing incredibly well in that arena. But because of the experiences with that breakup, I was doing terribly with intimate relationships. And, after that moment, I was single for a ridiculously long time because I would self-destruct every potential relationship, every dating experience I was in. And I would often get told, like, as a salesperson, you should be amazing, right? If you can sell in that environment, surely you could sell yourself to women in the dating world, right?
Yeah.
And it did not happen that way at all. So I ended up harboring a lot of distrust and aggression towards women, which existed for many, many years, which is probably a significant part of where the loneliness aspect of the depression came from. Just kept pushing people away.
Yeah. And that was your best strategy in that moment that you had, which was to protect yourself. You didn't want to open yourself up to a new relationship that could potentially end up with the same end result. And because your trust and intimacy with another person was, I don't want to call it broken, was challenged, that was your way to protect yourself. And that's normal. That's what people do. That's our best strategy. A lot of the times we close our heart so that we don't have to feel the pain again.
And of course, with that closed heart, because I wasn't taking self-responsibility, I was blaming others. So I would blame women for my pain, which just compounded on itself then. And that would subsequently lead to experiencing anger all of the time, in the most ridiculous circumstances. It would be multiple times a day, not aggression, but anger. Like, it would be internal anger. Like, I would get unnecessarily angry at the smallest things. For example, like if I was at the store and someone didn't put their shopping cart in the bay properly, seething rage. I'd be like, just it's right there. Just make that extra 30. It was so debilitating all the time just to be experiencing this anger and just constantly.
How did you work through that part? How did you work through the anger and the healing from the pain of the breakup?
Well, I would say it started with managing it and transforming it. So I love this particular exercise where you kind of think about the rules for your life. And this is something that I learned from Tony Robbins. And it works really, really well. But I would also add a caveat that I also had to uproot the things that were causing the anger in the first place later on in life. But at the time, it was a case of looking at my life and thinking, what negative emotions am I experiencing far too often? And this was one of them. What positive experiences am I not experiencing and I want more of in my life? And you start to think of the rules that trigger those emotions. So if I looked at anger, I would see that whenever someone cut me off at traffic, whenever somebody didn't put their shopping cart in the bay properly, I was experiencing anger on a daily basis, often several times a day. But then, because I was a salesperson at the time, my access to joy would come whenever I did, for example, like a deal, and I would get a commission check, which would be roughly once a month. So I'd experience anger several times a day, joy once a month. And there was an imbalance there. So when I started kind of thinking about implementing rules whereby I would experience joy whenever I got to play with my dog Link, for example, I was then giving myself access to joy multiple times a day on a regular basis. And that was incredibly helpful. But it really, it only really had its true power when I started to be able to uncover the emotions that I was repressing that caused the whole thing in the first place.
Right. Which brings me back to when we go through a breakup, whether we are the one choosing it or we are the one receiving it, there's still a grieving process that takes place. And much of the time, we really don't know the way to get there, to get through it. And we get stuck in it. So I'd like, if you may take just a few moments here to share, how did you navigate through the grieving process of that major breakup so that you can then get to the point where through awareness, the anger starts to, you realize you have that significant imbalance. You have joy once a month and the rest of the month you're pissed off and angry. And you're relying on your testosterone to navigate you through every single day, thinking that this is giving you power. This is making you feel better. But you've learned, I know, that in fact, it doesn't serve you. It didn't serve you. It actually brought you more self-isolation, self-disconnection, and lacking intimacy on a profound level. And so how did you get through the grieving process of that relationship's death?
That's a good question. It's a question I've never actually been asked or considered before.
Thank you.
So this will be an interesting exploration. It certainly took a long time. I would say that I certainly didn't grieve it effectively or let go of it or accept it up until that key moment in Bali. Wow. Because it wasn't just the grief of the loss of relationship that because I was able to let go of her after over some time. I was able to let go of my experience with her and what that meant. But what I struggled with was letting go of the future that I had in my mind or the person that I was at that time. So it was almost like not, it was the holding on to my old story that kept me stuck in that moment. Because I wasn't allowing myself to become the person that was going to move on. In my head, I was staying as that 27-year-old man. And though I was chronologically aging, I wasn't emotionally aging. I was stuck in that moment. So I would say that took me a long time to do. And I can't necessarily say that I was deliberate about the process, because as I was exploring this, I found there were very, very few places to go. And I found myself exploring everything in my healing journey over the past 2 years was uncertain. It felt like I was guessing in a lot of ways. But I remember this absolutely crucial moment. So I started to turn up to these mindset calls of this program that I was on, this course, this LinkedIn course. And they held mindset calls every Wednesday. And I never went. I never went before. I was like, my mindset is fine. I can think my way out of any problem. But when I said uncle, I started to turn up to these calls. And I didn't say anything for the first several. And then at one point, I remember one of the attendees started talking about her experience with grieving her mum. She just lost her mum. And it was not a typical conversation to have in that group, but she was completely open and vulnerable about the experience because her mum was very old. She was in a lot of pain. So she felt a combination of grief and loss, but also gratitude that she was finally at peace because she was in so much pain. And I think that takes a lot to admit that we might have gratitude when someone passes, right? There's shame in that. So her willingness to be vulnerable in that moment then gave me the courage to start to talk about my challenges. And the very next week, I did the same thing. It was the first time ever that I was able to do that. And the people in the call, they didn't judge me in any way, shape, or form. They connected with me. They showed compassion towards me. And I would say that that is a crucial moment for me because then I started to be able to see, have compassion, connection, and empathy for other people and their story and their perspectives, which has just allowed me to have connection as a core pillar of this entire healing journey. So I realize that this is a long-winded story because I don't have a direct answer to your question, but I was able to kind of heal a lot of the loneliness issues through this kind of acceptance, this non-judgment, this re-invoking of compassion and empathy that had just laid dormant for so long.
Yeah, that's beautiful, Martin. I want to take a moment here just to honor you because it's simple, not easy to come in to a podcast and open up and share your, part of your life story that had a profound impact on your life and your relationships for years. And especially for men who, many of us got to download the programming early on that this is not how we show up as the tough guy. And so I just want to thank you for having the courage, knowing that this is the first time you are sharing your story in live and in a social media platform. You're usually the one asking the questions for your speakers and your summits that you've done and an upcoming one. So I'm just so grateful in this moment that you showed up because not only is there an opportunity for additional healing to take place just by being right here, right now with me, but I have no doubt that your story is going to touch somebody across the globe today or on replay when they pick it up. If I may, what I heard you say, and it's really critical when it comes to men and women and depression and the grieving the loss of a relationship, is that many of us want to retreat. We want to pull back and just retreat from conversations, retreat from getting help in a form of seeing a therapist or a coach and or help groups, self-help groups like the one you picked up. That group changed your life because of one person that had the courage to raise a hand and share a truth in their life that you heard that gave you courage to come back the next week and show up for you. I could tell you as a man, I was faced with a similar scenario. And for me, where I got to do the major healing was also in a self-help group. And something told me almost out of the gate that if I was going to show up, I had to have the courage to raise my hand and share every aspect of my story, even the parts that embarrassed the crap out of me up until that moment. Because I knew that if I wanted to get well, if I wanted to experience the life that I deserved, I had to be willing to tell the truth. They say you're only as sick as your secrets. And that is true. I had an awareness in that moment that there were many people that showed up in these rooms and they just listened and they didn't raise their hand. And I didn't want to be one of those people because something told me that the first step is having a feeling, is to feel it. The second step was to reveal it. And the third step, we get to heal it. It releases so much of the weight and the pain when we let it out, when we release it, not through anger, not through rage, but through just having the courage to be vulnerable. And so what a beautiful, beautiful part of your story that you just shared. What I'd like to do is kind of move us along a little bit and ask about what role did any addictions come up for you that played into either the breakup and or trying to get through the depression, and what did that look like for you? Did you play with addictive behaviors, and what did you find yourself? Did you get into a rabbit hole? Did you fall in?
Yeah. That's a very, very kind of interesting one that comes with a yes and no category, because I think sometimes people have different definitions of what addictions might be. And I will have to say that I've never had any addictions that have taken me to a point of danger in any way, shape, or form. You know, I've never depended on alcohol so much that I need it to exist. I've never really taken any kind of significant drugs or anything like that. But 100% there have been things in my life that I've relied upon to get me through certain circumstances. And by the way, I've never seen anyone be able to do what you just did on the screen. I think that's really cool. Not to distract from the thing
that I developed. It's just part of the platform, and I've tried
cool.
a bunch of them, and this is my favorite one because I've got some opportunities to have some fun. We can have some fun with it. But I love what Donna said here. I relate to a lot of the things you guys are talking about so deep. Thank you, Donna, for joining us. By the way, I do want to take a moment to acknowledge our viewers. It's been really quiet, which tells me that they're listening. But I want to thank our viewers and listeners. If you have any questions or comments, would love, drop them into the comments. If you hear something that resonates with you, light us up by tapping would love, your love button on your monitor, that is. And we just want to thank you for joining us today in this important conversation. Before we jump into where you were, Martin, I'd like to just bring a couple of statistics to the conversation. 2020, as we all know, we've all been affected one way or the other globally through what's going on. There has, as it relates to, let's call it anti-anxiety medicine right now, the numbers through April are up 31.5%. That's for prescriptions given, that's just in the United States. I didn't look at other countries or globally, but since April, 31.5% more prescriptions are written for anti-anxiety. And through April, I couldn't get past that, any further updates. Antidepressant use has also seen a sharp increase that's in the double digits from same time a year ago. Mental health has become the single largest issue for which patients are seeking care from the general practitioners in 2020, according to the RACGP's 2018 Health of the Nation report. So we know that mental health is no doubt is a huge challenge across the globe right now. We're going to get into, before we're done today, some potential tips and places that people can maybe go for some ways to reduce anxiety, depression. You didn't really touch on anxiety a whole lot, but should I presume that was part of your challenge as well?
You know what? I have never really had those challenges with anxiety, at least not that I can identify. Maybe that was what was transformed into anger. But no, I've never kind of, which is odd for me because I see the two terms alongside each other so often that I'm like, okay, depression, anxiety, are they the same thing then? But for me, no, it was just kind of pretty much, it was this feeling of just complete demotivation, just complete can't do anything, can't face the day, can't get out of bed, can't do any work, can't even get up and play video games, right? That's how bad it got at some point. I couldn't even, and that's with the addictions thing. I didn't even have the motivation to delve into an addiction, because even the idea of drinking or something like that felt like too much work and too much effort.
Okay. What about food for you? How was your relationship with food? How was it at that time?
It was, so I do have challenges with a food addiction, kind of.
Okay.
Again, it's not a case of, and I would say I've probably got a similar addiction with alcohol as well. In terms of, I mean, the best way I could almost describe it is it's like a light addiction. Food has always been my go-to state changer. So it would always be a case of feeling stressed or in pain in some way, shape, or form. Pizza, instant reframe, feel better. And that's still very much a kind of real thing for me right now, is that I still very much have that food addiction. And what you said in our interview, I've actually been implementing in that process, and it started me on a better path.
Are you tell me more. What was that?
Yeah.
Are you doing differently?
So you said that when you're making key decisions like that, because I always say that, like, I make those decisions when I'm hungry, right? I'm hungry, go into the kitchen. Oh, I can't be bothered making that. Stick a pizza in the oven. It'll be ready in 20 minutes. It'll be nice and simple. And you said that, next time that I do that, to ask myself, am I making that decision as an adult or as a child? Is my inner child allowing me to make that decision? Or is me, as Martin, as the adult, making those choices?
Yeah.
And it's been really, really effective. So I appreciate that. And
wow.
Continuing on that work.
Love it.
Yeah.
Love it. It's first time hearing that. So that's how this business works. The work that you're doing, creating and bringing forward these platforms, speakers, summit, virtual summit, and then the connections we have as we interview each other, as we show up. There's such a growth opportunity for us if we don't miss it. And when we don't miss it, we get the ultimate gift. We get to up level, we get to learn and continue to grow as men and women. Thank you for sharing that with me. So now you are working on changing your relationship with food. I got to tell you, I've been in this thing for 5 years now, and I still have to consciously make better choices for myself as it relates to my relationship with food. And it's a little bit easier because I am in a committed relationship. And so, but it doesn't stop me from wanting to raid the pantry or go after something in the fridge that for me, brings me some comfort in that moment, but ultimately it may, but it's a short hit. It doesn't have sustainability. Meaning as soon as I've ingested it, I want more. And so it is a constant shifting and changing my relationship with food. I don't know that will ever change. Anything else come up for you? What about work? Did you overwork? Was that too many hours, or did you have balance in that regard?
That is an interesting
I asked about work, Martin, only because that's not uncommon, especially for men.
Yeah. Yes, and I would say that's still very much a real thing. But it's not like it's not kind of one of the major addictions for me, and hasn't been. Do I work too much? Yes, absolutely. I 100% overwork. But I don't work as an escape from anything. So it's not an addiction. It's very much a case for me that, instead of addictions like TV. So I don't really watch any TV at all. I don't even have one. I've got a projector for the occasional movie, but I don't watch TV. So instead of doing something that would fog my brain, I'd rather be working. I would rather be working, or at least learning something, or watching something kind of educational, or as my partner calls it, edutainment.
Beautiful. Yeah, I'm with you, brother. Jillian Bowie, who's actually one of your neighbors coming out of the UK, she says the choices of food we grab for can be a pointer to what's going on inside. Yep. So thank you for sharing that, Jillian. And Mary Kelly says salad plate instead of a dinner plate works well with portion control. Mary is, in fact, my partner and fiance. And that has been one of the strategies that we embraced that helped me eventually release 60 pounds of toxic weight and waste within my body. Yeah. But there's more to it than just portion control. There's the emotional attachment as well, which is really what you and I are chatting about today. Mm-hmm. What I'd like to do, Martin, is invite you to kind of share with me where are you at today as it relates to opening yourself up, releasing the anger, which was a couple of years ago that you started on that healing journey. Where are you today as it relates to inviting healthy intimacy into your life, and what is different about it today than it was prior to your rock bottom at the Rock Bar in Bali?
So I've got two different forks in the road to go down here. They're both scary. One is significantly more scary. So I'm going to opt for that one, because that feels like, if it's the scariest road to go down, then I should probably go down that one. Because you said at the start of the call, like for actually in the studio in the pre-call, you said about what's your intention for both the call and for the summit. You know, what's my big why? And I said, whatever is happening in your life, it's okay. And what I mean by that is, for the past 4 or 5 years, I've had challenges with erectile dysfunction. And as a man, particularly as a man that was very much living with the masculine mask, right? Self-reliant, testosterone filled, achievement focused, fulfilling all of the cliches. Having that starting to impact my life was terrifying. And so much so that I didn't open up, talk about it, face it for 4 years. And what that led to is questions around my masculinity. Am I even a man anymore? Can I even find an intimate partner again with this experience? Like, what does this mean? I even questioned my sexuality at one point. I was like, am I so, you know, is this a reflection of the fact that I might actually be gay, but I'm so far in the closet that I'm just too afraid to admit it? So I actually had to go on an experience where for about half an hour, I tried to find men attractive to see if this was the thing. After that half an hour experience, I was like, no. But I had those questions, and it took 4 years to talk about it for the first time. And the reason that I kind of want to bring that up is, you know, I could say, like, what if I'd talked about it to begin with? You know, it wouldn't be this big monster challenge that I have to deal with now. I might have been able to tackle it at its infancy, whether it's psychological, whether it's nutritional, whether it's both. Now, I've certainly kind of accepted that this is where I am, because it also gives me the opportunity to talk about it, which is part of my journey. But when I first started talking to people about this, I realized that it's okay. I realized that it's completely okay that I'm having this experience. Nobody around me, none of my friend circles, nobody judges me for having this experience. I don't feel less. If anything, by being able to now have this sense of purpose, I actually feel more because of that. So my message to anybody here is, no matter what you're going through, it's okay.
Sometimes pause is appropriate. This is one of those moments. It's not every day that we're willing to admit maybe our greatest secret and inner conflict in such a public way. Even with friends, we hold back. Thank you for putting this out there and sharing this as part of your story. Obviously, this lady knows you.
Yes, that's my partner, Rebecca.
She says,
I love you too, Rebecca.
Deep love and respect for you.
Yeah, I love you too.
Martin, how do you feel right now in this moment, having shared part of your story, part of your truth, and then receiving this from Rebecca? What do you feel right now?
I feel so full that I don't know what to do with it. It's almost discombobulating.
Well, don't think about what you're feeling.
Exactly, right? I'm
What
still
is it?
very much navigating that space, right? Like I've used my intellect to solve. I've used my intellect to try and deal with everything for so many years that it's challenging to be in touch with what I feel sometimes.
Yeah. I believe that the greatest gift that you can give yourself is the gift of expressing your feelings. But I think the key is to know who's safe in your inner circle. Not everybody is safe for us. And here's where we get to kind of filter through, sort through the people in our life that we can share what we're feeling. But the first step, as you just said, is we have to identify what the heck it is that we're feeling. Because a lot of times it's misdirected. Like the anger really was just a misdirected emotion. It wasn't what you were feeling. And it's just how it comes out sideways, because it's, especially with men, we're not really taught how to tap into, have the awareness, then express it so we could release it and be free. I love your tagline for the summit that's coming up. The tagline is, it's about emotional freedom. And I raise my arms in this moment. I invite you to join me, because you just shared a moment of emotional freedom. How does that feel to open your chest wide open right now and just kind of like let it open up?
This is the perfect example of, it would have been so easy, because effectively we're holding our arms up on camera. It's a simple act that I would have resisted so much, thinking this is silly, this is stupid. But when you open yourself up to any kind of possibility, that idea of shame or foolishness just goes out the window.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The truth is, it doesn't matter. What doesn't matter is what other people think of us. What matters is what we think of us. We spend so many years chasing love, chasing acceptance from others. And we're looking in all the wrong places. Because ultimately, where we can find it is right here within us. And when we begin to understand that as a universal truth, it can change not only how we feel about ourselves, but it will change the people that we attract in our life. And I think that's the journey that you've been on. You've been seeking your answers for yourself so that you can have days of joy and bliss and self-love and self-respect and self-forgiveness and self-compassion. Because that is the antidote for turning off those inner feelings of loneliness. Inner feelings of loneliness create a reality of lack. And so it's a beautiful path that you are on, Martin. With what time we do have left, because we are about 11 minutes from the hour. By the way, Val Whitaker says, big hug, Martin.
Yeah, that's my mum.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, it's great to have my mum on here listening as well.
Why is that?
Because as I've started to, so like I mentioned, this is the first time on a platform like this, and I've been able to kind of share my story in private groups and in private conversations. And what I kind of realized is just by saying yes to this call, and maybe there was part of my subconscious that was avoiding it due to fear. Maybe not. I don't know. But I'd realized that a lot of this stuff that I talked about, I'd not spoken about with my mum, particularly associated with my rock bottom moment in Bali, because I would be so scared that she would be worried for me, right? And the last thing you want to do is scare your mum or worry your mum. So it prompted me to actually have a conversation with my mum for about an hour and a half and talk about some of these experiences that I've had. And I talked about the loneliness, I talked about the disconnection, and it was a wonderfully connected call. So now being able to have a conversation like this, not worried about who I might impact by sharing some of these stories, it's now quite freeing that I can express it and my mom could be here to hear it.
That's absolutely beautiful. Thank you for sharing that, Martin. We talked about it in the green room before we went live, that intimacy is not just between ourselves and a partner, a girlfriend, in your case, and in mine, my fiance. But intimacy comes to us and through us in all of our relationships. And what we get to do is practice improving and creating healthier intimacy, even between siblings, even between a parent. And as I shared with you, I get to show up and continuously work on improving my own relationship with my own mom today, as she too watches most of the shows I do, most of the podcasts. She's a fan. But there's also those moments where, as a mom, as a parent, I'm sure it's got to be challenging to hear her child talk about things going back to the childhood, the inner child stuff, the younger years that, as a parent, you feel responsible for. But it's opened up the conversation between mother and son to be able to speak as two healthier adults and clean up maybe some things that needed to be cleaned up, that allow us to continue to do our own healing independently and together in the relationship that had some fractures in it for many, many years. So it's a beautiful opportunity that I'm glad that you got to experience coming into your first interview with your mom. What I'd like to do with what time we do have left is to really invite you to share what is this summit about, and tell us about the summit and what was your why. You mentioned that you in our conversations you call it your passion project. I believe it's even part of your marketing. Why is it your passion project, and what have you learned from bringing forward 16 speakers for the one that's upcoming next week? It's a free access. You just register for free. It's 4 days. I'll let you, I don't want to steal your thunder. Tell us about your upcoming Emotional Freedom Virtual Summit on mental health.
Yeah. It's very much a it's so much of what we've already talked about. It really is about the stories, because it's a focus on men's mental health, which I think is a crucial topic right now. But there's an added tagline that it's for men and those that love him. And the reason that that tagline is there is because one of my good friends had her husband in hospital for back surgery, and he wouldn't open up about his symptoms. He wouldn't open up about the challenges that he was having. So as his wife, she would have to coax the symptoms out of him and then tell them to the resident nurse. So she became really good friends with the nurse simply because, but it was this, they created this ridiculous process. And if he was just able to open up to begin with, you wouldn't have this unnecessary elongated trajectory of healing. And I think that's a really interesting kind of indictment of where men's mental health is at the moment. So the summit is kind of focused on sharing the stories to give men in pain belief, inspiration, and motivation that things can be better. So it includes therapists. So we do have kind of that side of the healing process to talk about depression and anxiety, and different methods of kind of bringing out vulnerability, sharing stories. And I'm hoping that it just gives people a little bit of courage, because we're not going to solve the problem over the course of 4 days, right? But if we could just redirect some thinking and give some belief and some inspiration, then I'm hoping that it will direct men towards healing, vulnerability, expression, rather than what could be the alternative is some of the really, really kind of dangerous content that is being fed to men on platforms like YouTube, for example. Things like the red pill community, which takes men's anger and says, you're in pain right now, it's their fault, and just redirects it to blame. And I've seen that happen to so many men. And it creates things like anti-feminist, anti-women's movements, and there's just so much hate in there. And they say that hurt men hurt themselves and others more than anybody, right? So the aim of the summit is to redirect thinking towards healing and away from pain.
Beautiful. I have it on the banner going across the bottom. It's to find the registration. It's at don'tfretsummit.com to register for your free access. It starts on December 17th through 20th. Each day has, on average, about 4 or 5 speakers?
Yeah. It's actually increased to 20 speakers. So I probably need to update some of the marketing there. But yes. So about 4 or 5 speakers today, and it's all pre-recorded. So as long as you register for the summit, you can watch as much as you like across those 4 days. Right? So there's no specific times.
Does day 1 shut down when day 2 starts and you can't access day 1 again? Or how do you have that?
Still access. Yeah, you could still access the content for sure.
Okay.
For the full duration, because I'm very, very aware of people's schedules. And the way that they're told is you can watch them physically, in front of a computer, but I actually advocate the idea of what I call WIDSY. I always have to remember the acronym, whilst you're doing something else content.
Okay.
So combine self-care when you're doing the summit, like go for a walk, listen to it, take a bath, watch one of the calls, do it while you're cooking something healthy, whatever it might be. The content is designed for people to actually be doing something else at the same time. Okay.
And if I understand correctly, I'm going to be coming in on day 2. If that hasn't changed, I believe day 2 is. So you're going to only open up day 1 is only open for day 1. You're not going to be able to see day 2, 3, or 4 on the first day, right? the first day is day 1, day 2. You'll be able to see all the speakers from day 1 and day 2. Is that how it's set up?
Perfectly honestly, I'm trying my best to get everything done so it's all available from day 1 through to day 4.
Okay.
That's my dream scenario.
Okay.
But I've got a lot on my plate to get there, so I might have to release as much as I can on day 1 and then some on day 2.
Okay. Now, as far as the time that it starts, what time will it be open for people to, I guess you'll get notified once you register, you'll get an email notification that it's open and you can watch?
Yeah, 12 p.m. UK time. So that would be 5 p.m. Wait, no, other way. 7 a.m. Eastern.
Okay.
And that would be 4 a.m. Pacific time is what time that it would open up. Yeah.
Real quick, before I'm going to ask you one question before we wrap it up here, but I do want to acknowledge Kristen Caraballo says this is a great interview, and so I'm listening intently. I'm wondering if you're so depressed as I relate with seeking counseling and coaches. Can you heal without revealing to some people so as to spare some people, or do you have to just release it all? And whatever happens, happens. Do you want to take a run at that?
Well, I think very much what you said earlier, Jay, it's about safety.
Yeah.
I really, really kind of appreciate Kristen's perspective there, trying to spare others and being considerate of others. But I would redirect that thinking to be more about your healing, Kristen, rather than thinking about other people's hearing and protecting other people. So kind of understand who is safe for you and start the vulnerability process and the opening up process. If it's something serious, I also kind of do advocate the professional route and the therapy route. I would never say not do that. But at the same time, starting your own process of healing, find out who is safe for you and just start the process of opening up there.
Right. Not everybody is trustworthy, and not everybody could handle your truth. And so it's really finding yourself either a progressive group where people are, where there's some type of moderator that's managing it so that it's not just a show up and dump, but there's some boundaries or parameters around some structure there. Great question. Though I do want to also acknowledge you got another family member, Adam Fretwell. It's great stuff, bro.
So on that note as well, and I just because my brother popping in has reminded me of this, because to Kristen's point. So when I first started sharing and opening up, like it's also okay to make mistakes, right? It's okay to be there. It's okay to open up, and it's okay to make mistakes in that space too. I remember being so my brother used to be a manager of our local football team, Colby Football Club. And I was talking about, with one of the substitutes, I was talking about kind of like my goals with this summit. And we were talking back and forth, and I started to talk to him about my experiences with erectile dysfunction on the side of a football pitch with this guy that it was with Flash. That's to my brother. And like the moment I said about erectile dysfunction, you could see him going, like, having a panic moment. It's like, it was awakening to me to kind of think, okay, yeah, so there are limits, there are kind of things to hold back. So understanding your safety, but also like, it's okay that he knows that, right? It's okay that I told him I'm okay with it. He's okay with it. It's all okay.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Here's the question, 2 questions. The first one is, what have you learned about yourself by putting together as the producer and host of the Emotional Freedom Summit? What have you learned through this process that you didn't know before?
I guess it's almost like a cliche, but the more you know, the less you know. It's like, even though I'm on a healing journey and I'm certainly kind of in a different space than I was, the level, the amount of fear and imposter syndrome and like questions of self-worth that come up so often, they are ever present. So even with all of this healing, even with the summit, even with kind of experiences like this, these questions come up on a daily basis. So it's not about blocking them. It's about allowing them to be there and allowing it also to be okay that they're there. And I'm very fortunate that Rebecca is unbelievably supportive in this space. And we had a call before this call and several texts, and it gave me a lot of grounding.
Beautiful. Beautiful. You know what I've learned is that knowledge, they say knowledge is power. That's one of the taglines in the USA.
Yeah.
And that may be true. But action is superpower. Having the knowledge is just knowledge. Unless we take action steps to step into through courage and implement change in our behavior, biohacking our thoughts as part of that, being able to say, is it true? Whatever thoughts coming through, like I'm feeling bad about myself, or self-deprecating, self-sabotaging thoughts, to be able to catch yourself in that moment and say, is it true? And the answer is, no, it's not true. You know it's not true. But it doesn't stop our thoughts from going there. But what we can do today is catch yourself, and that's just a little tool or a tip that I'm sharing, is to ask yourself, is this thought true? And that right there can kind of bring you to a kind of stop that thought pattern, that cycle. And then say, well, if it's not true, what is true? What is true is I am a loving, kind man that just wants to love and be loved. And is that true? And the answer is going to always be yes. And with that, Martin, I'd like to thank you again for joining me today on this conversation on emotional freedom and mental health. Congratulations on your upcoming summit. I look forward to participating, listening, learning, taking my own action. And with that, any closing thoughts or words you'd like to share? Just immense gratitude for you, Jay, for joining me at the summit, first of all, and giving me lessons and education, for inviting me onto your platform. Gratitude for everyone listening, and gratitude for the support and the kind words and the comments, and yeah, just immense gratitude for you and everybody within this community. Anybody willing to share as well, anybody willing to open up and express, I will always be grateful for. Beautiful. I've really enjoyed our conversation today. So profound, so honest, so truthful. In this moment, having come in with some discomfort, some anxiety, maybe a little fear, how do you feel right now, Martin? Epic. In a word, absolutely epic. It's been an incredible experience, and I really, really appreciate as well the questions that you've been asking, Jay, because they've been certainly probing
enough that I couldn't get away with a performance or anything like that. So yeah, it's been really true and honest, and I appreciate that.
You got it. And here's closing thoughts from your partner today. We are a partnership. Your support means everything to me. I have so much gratitude and love for you.
It's an incredible feeling. It's an incredible feeling. And, you know, this is the circumstance that I never would have dreamed of based on a person, you know, a person who has challenges with erectile dysfunction, to have a partnership and a love like that. I love you too, Rebecca. Thank you so much for your support and your words.
And with that, viewers and listeners, thank you for joining Martin Fretwell and myself today. If you should have heard something that you enjoyed, that resonated with you, please share it out. Share it out with your friends, family members, and on your Facebook feed, also coming in live on YouTube. If you joined us on YouTube, thanks for joining us. We'll catch you next week. I've got a guest coming in on Real People, Real Health, who was diagnosed with MS when he was 19 years old. 25 years later, he has a documentary that is completed called Living Proof, and he today lives with no symptoms of MS because of the research that he has done and that he's brought forward in Living Proof. He's going to be a guest on Real People, Real Health, sharing his story of not just surviving, but thriving with a diagnosis 25 years ago of MS. His name is Matthew Embray. Living Proof is the name of the documentary. We'll see you next Wednesday on Real People, Real Health. Thanks again for joining me, Martin.
Adios.